Good morning. Welcome to the Welcome to the December webinar. So we're running on a couple different platforms this morning. So we've got like a 30-second delay before we actually launch on our YouTube platform. So we're just gonna kind of like do 30 seconds of chit chat and welcome. So I will reintroduce again, but we're excited to have everybody here and just to say that this is kind of like our favorite combo with Angela Lindig and Janet Hecky. And going to be talking about parents' participation. Yeah. And this is something we're really excited about because it's kind of a new thing for parents to come to the table
and be a partner in the decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good. And I know I wasn't supposed to be here. The flyer said Sarah, but Sarah had a family emergency, so I get to fill in. So
yeah. Okay, well, I always like to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can now officially begin. Great. So welcome to the December Idaho Federation of Families parent webinar. Today we're going to discuss a really important change kind of in the way that parents are involved, families are involved in the new system of care. So the idea is parents as equal partners. So when they come to the table, to recognize that their voice is just as important as everybody else's voice at the table. It does not matter the degree and the letters behind, because what the parents bring and what the family members bring is their experience of knowing the child and being the experts in this child. So really kind of helping to make that philosophical shift. One, for the parents to be able to understand how important their voice is, and two, I think also that professionals are going to recognize that parents are their partners. So we have Angela Lindig, who is the director of Idaho Parents Unlimited, who is joining us, does a lot of training on this topic. And then Janet Hecky, who is from the Idaho Parent Network, who is kind of our regular go-to expert on all things kind of parent related, because just her voice, but then she also represents a large collective voice. Not to put too much pressure on you. You represent many. I've been collecting stories for a long time. But some other information first is you will notice there should be, if there is a question and answer section, we would love to have your questions as you're going along. We will feed them to Janet and Angela throughout the session. Then there's also a chat box. Do not put your questions in the chat box. We have a hard time picking those up. But that's a great way to be able to exchange information, ideas, and just kind of chat among people who are watching it. Also at the very end, and Janet will explain this a little bit more, is that there's kind of some poll questions and some information that we would like from you all. That we couldn't put in an official poll, so we're going to put those in the chat box. I probably totally confused you, Janet. We'll be back in that. Because of our funding and being able to continue to do this educational webinars, we do need parent feedback. So at the end, when we do official poll questions, when they pop up, it's really, really helpful if you will participate in those, share your thoughts on them. Data that we capture from that is really important in terms of our reporting to the sources that find us. And for those that are on YouTube, you're not going to be able to do the polls. What you can do is, I believe, there's a chat box on YouTube. As you see the poll, if you will just kind of put your answer in, we can capture your information. That's a little bit harder, but we would appreciate your participating in that. And thanks to be here. Next month, real quick, we're going to do a State Department of Education, Developmental Disabilities, and someone from the YES Project to talk about how all those three agencies intersect. So that's for the January one. Date's not decided yet, so we'll be back to you on that one. And with that, ladies, further introductions if you would like, or you can jump right into it again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Well, I'll jump right in. So I'm Angela Lindig, the director of Idaho Parents Unlimited, and a lot of what we're going to discuss here, we offer maybe the second half of this information is information that we provide through our organization in broad context. So I think what we'll do is we'll have Janet sort of get started with talking about the YES program and some of the principles of care behind the YES program. And then I'll just kind of jump in as we go along. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then we'll have Susie go ahead and forward our slides for us. And we'll just every now and then make a comment to move them forward, or we'll forget what we're doing. So
Great. So our first slide here is just lets you know what our title is and of our program today. So we've already been introduced, so we're going to move swiftly along through that. What we're really here to talk about is how we foster parent collaboration and professional collaboration today, and some partnering strategies. And in order to kind of give some background for that within the YES project, I'm going to go over a few things that, like Angela said, are principles of care and how that looks and guides our interactions. So Susie, when you get the chance, you can forward it one slide there. So we're going to talk a little bit about the principles of care and what's guiding the overriding philosophy behind the creation of the YES system of care. And then I'm going to introduce a few of the different services, supports, and concepts that are really working within and rolling out, so that you all are aware of those and how those may look different from how you're currently experiencing mental health services in the state of Idaho. So under the guidance of the principle of care, what overarching things are guiding our interactions with our therapists, with our school teachers, with our probation officers, with anyone who's in contact with us and our children in terms of mental health services? The focus really is shifting in the new YES system of care to what does the family need to improve, right? In past systems, and I know you've been through this with your children, and you see it all the time in the work that you do, so much of what we do in terms of assessments and goal setting is what's wrong.
Right, absolutely, as opposed to what are the needs and the strengths.
Right.
Right.
And that's a big change, a big shift for us, is to be able in this new system of care to focus on what does the family need to improve. And sometimes that means that we have a strength in one area that we're not using, that we haven't maybe even thought about it, that we could use to improve and help support a need that we have in another area. An example of that might be our child loves cooking, just loves cooking, but has a terrible anxiety being around other people. Well, you can use that strength and love of cooking within a therapeutic environment to help them, maybe with one person at first, and then to learn in like a cooking class type setting, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that is a guiding principle is just understanding the complexities of the child and family situation. And this is key to working together towards solutions.
Absolutely. And that it's not just focused on just the child,
right?
The family, all the dynamics that go into that.
And we had that with my family. I have 3 children, and my youngest has a severe developmental disability. It really is a game changer: sleep disorder, seizure disorder, behavior disorder, completely nonverbal. And I had a son with a severe mental health disorder. And how those two played into each other was never really discussed.
Right.
And in this new system of care, they would be actively seeking that kind of information. How does my son's sister impact his mental health and his ability to interact with us, and what can we do to support that situation?
And Janet and I have similar situations in that regard, and that I also have a child with a mental health diagnosis and one with a developmental disability. And so we did have a lot of those different dynamics working in our family as well. And so when you're focusing just on the one child, you forget that there are all these other things at play.
Right. Yeah. We, just like the systems, the different parts of the system kind of silo their work. We tend to silo our children.
Yeah,
too.
that's a really
I'm only dealing with this one.
Well, and I have found, especially in my work in my office as well, that it's quite rare that we have a family that is having some needs for just one of their children. Typically, there are multiple factors.
There's definitely, and anytime you have a child with a mental health disorder, your whole family's dealing with a mental health disorder, right? So this is where the system of care really now, and one of our guiding principles is going to be looking towards what your child and your family do well in equal measure with where you need support and improvement. So we're going to move forward here, just going over a few other principles that guide our interactions. Collaboration is really key in this new system of care, and it requires listening and respecting all points of view. And Angela, you've done a lot of work around this.
We're gonna get into some of that a little deeper in some of the future slides, but the listening to the voices of the family, even when the family might not know what it is they don't know. Right. Does that make sense?
It does.
Listening for what they don't know, maybe. is key.
I think that's really important as providers move through the system of care and trying to gather the whole story. And instead of just the needs of the child, to be looking at the needs and the strength of the whole family, that will help give them information they need to fill in gaps and make connections that maybe as parents, you can't see the forest through the trees type of thing. Right?
Especially when you're trying to get from breakfast to bedtime. That's
right.
You know, that we have days that's what our family is focused on. If we can survive today, we're good. So yeah, there's bigger stuff happening.
I am frequently fond of saying there were many, many days when if I was still breathing when I went to bed, that was considered a successful day for me.
It's excellent.
And for my son too, actually.
Yeah.
Another thing that we deal with in this is cultural competency.
Yep. Yeah. And we actually do talk about this a little further too, because culture is not just about race and ethnicity and these types of things. Culture is the culture of the family. What is the culture of our individual families? And that must be listened to and respected. And I love that in the new, in these guiding principles, that is considered. I'll give a quick example. We had a counselor at one point, actually, for my middle child who was struggling as a result of the dynamics occurring in our house with his two sisters. But she had given him some feedback about how he, being so close to adulthood, he was 17, that he really could tell us no. He could tell us no on some of the things that we were wanting him to do and participate with. And we all kind of looked at each other and said, that's not okay. And even my son said that wasn't okay. He said, well, I'm not going to do that. I need to be able to help so she didn't understand the culture of our family is that we come together, and that's our family culture. And so anybody who's interacting with the family really does need to have that appreciation of what maybe that's your thought process, but what does this family feel?
Right.
And how do you work within that?
And where can you use that as a strength, right? Because our family cultures can be used as a strength to help other things.
Absolutely.
This is really a huge one. We all know that the healing path for our children and just the trajectory that they live on is never a straight line. Right. You can align every service and support in perfect measure for your child, and their trajectory is never going to be a straight line forward, right? This system of care, one of its guiding principles is we don't give up. No matter what it is, no matter what the trajectory looks like, no matter how bouncy it is and how far up and down it is, no matter how frustrated we get or how much we feel like, I don't have the answers. Whether we're professionals or we're parents, there are times when just the reality of it is, I don't know what to do next. I've exhausted my options. I've tried everything. And this team will not give up. You will have support around you, and they will say, we don't have the answer right now. Right. We're going to find the answers, and we're going to stand by you until we get movement, and through the movement, we're going to stand by you. And I think that's so important for families to realize you're not alone.
I'll probably mention it again further in, but I live sort of in the land of hope and high expectations. And I'm grateful for the human condition that allows us to continue to hope and have high expectations, because there are lots of times when it is easy to see, when there are not answers, when systems aren't necessarily working, when we are in that big tangled web of things that in the day to day. And I really do believe I do appreciate that. Those moments where something clicks and connects and works, and there are the people that surround us in these teams that help provide that and bring back that hope
and can help celebrate with us.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Recognize, as a parent of a child with a developmental disability, those first steps. People, most people are used to their children taking their first steps in their first year. And when you have to wait until your child is 5, 6, 7, 8 years old to take the first steps.
Which I think both did. Well, maybe I did 5.
It's great to have people around you to celebrate with you. And
that's where I go into milestone or into high expectations too. That no straight path. Right. My kids are now in adulthood, barely. But they are. And yet I haven't seen the learning and the growth and the development stop. And why would we expect it to stop? Right. You don't think somehow we get it in our minds that, our kids are going to become 18 and then they're 18 and, they are still learning. They're still growing. There's still great things happening. And that's where that high expectations comes in, because I can see new things that are positive and new developments. And it's like, wow, we're still going, we're still growing.
Which is one of the great things about using the CANs as an assessment tool, and it's used and updated at a minimum of every 3 months, because the outcomes that are in the CANs are actually used not only to track, how your child is doing in responding to the services and supports that they have, but the system as a whole uses that information to track how the system as a whole, our children as a whole, improving. And if not, what are we not doing that we need to be doing? And what are we doing right so that we can move that forward?
And the CAN stands for the
Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths. We've talked about that in a lot of other webinars, but there again, this might be your first one. And if it is, that the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths is the new assessment tool through the YES project that is used to help assess functional impairment along with the diagnosis for your child.
And side note, I've talked to a few parents who have gone through the CANS assessment, and I've heard nothing but positive feedback about it. So I think it really does focus on the family and the needs and strengths, as opposed to that, what you said in the beginning, just all that's wrong. Right.
And I think that's really important for both parents and for people, for professionals to understand, is that the CANS is not just another check mark. It's not just another tool where you're going down and checking the boxes, right? This is a tool to help you engage with the family and really get that full picture. And know as families together, we make better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we're all of our points of view are included. So moving forward just a little bit here, we talked a little bit about the CANs, and another tool here is the Child and Family Teams. So this is a tool, this is a perspective that the YES system has embraced to help families collaborate and coordinate services with anyone and everyone they want included. So if you have a minister or a pastor or your child's football coach or your teacher, your child's teacher, or any kind of professional that is involved with the system, with your child that touches your child, you can invite them into this Child and Family Team. So that this is the team of people that will sit down and you'll review the CANs, you'll review the services and supports that are available and that your child is accessing and the progress that your child makes. You'll brainstorm together.
This is where you do reduce some of those silos in care. Right.
That's a great way of looking at it, right? Is that you bring everyone around the table and you look at what is working and what isn't working for your family as a whole. And, you may not always agree. But the way that the Child and Family Team is set up is that your differences are discussed openly, that there's no shame and blame and judgment that happens, that you recognize that we can all have differences of opinions, but that together we're going to come together and make a better decision about how to move the whole family forward. So that's just a real brief introduction to Child and Family Teams. We'll discuss it further in another webinar, but I wanted you to be aware of the differences within YES. Another difference within YES is intensive care coordination. So this is for the most complex cases that they will have.
And there would be care coordination in the for all kids.
Yes.
Through
the Child and Family Team,
right,
there will be care coordination. But intensive care coordination is what will exist for our most complex cases. It will operate under the exact same principles as your Child and Family Team. There are just structurally some things that are a little bit different. Parents will have a choice. There are multiple ways to provide intensive care coordination. One I want to call out here is called wraparound. It's just one model that you can elect for your children. And there are specific roles that are assigned and oversight provided by a trained wraparound care coordinator. It is a fidelity model, which means that there are pieces and parts that they have to follow in order to ensure that the wraparound is performed correctly and done for your child. And one thing I did want to point out, there's a link on the slide here. 2 of the parents within the parent network have combined to write a wraparound family handbook. That has been published on the YES website. So you can go to the YES website under the resources, and there are 2 versions of it. There's an 8x10 version that I think you can pop up on your screen pretty easily. And then there's a slightly larger version of it as well that on my screen it was a little harder to read, but both versions are there. And they have put their life experience into how this works within the new system of care and can work for your child. And it really will help walk you through how wraparound might look for your child. And
that it's important to distinguish for those, for anyone who's had previous experiences with what was called wraparound services, that this is not necessarily the same thing as what was in the past,
Right.
that this is an actual model, evidence-based model of care
Right.
coordination. So that's great that those guides are there.
And we're super excited that we have this opportunity for families to experience any kind of intensive care coordination, but wraparound in particular. Moving along here, one of the new changes, Susie, if you could advance the slide there. One of the changes that we have is now we have a centralized concern and complaint line. So as you are going through this new system of care, and you hear us talking about on the webinars, on all of them, about what it is supposed to do, what we're designing, right. what we want it to look like, and you experience something that is completely unlike that, or you run across something that is frustrating, or you feel like it's just not working for your child, this is a concern and complaint line. And recognize that when you call this line, it will be reviewed by people in the different silos, the different departments, but there's also a parent that's on this committee. So know that you have someone who's within the system. Which
is fantastic that you've got that, once again, that parent voice, that as an equal partner, that the parents are valued in this process, right. For all parents to provide that voice and that perspective.
So this is a great number for you to keep handy, for you to have, and know that if you run across a roadblock and something that isn't working, it's probably not working for other parents too. So by informing the system of something that isn't working, you're helping us change the system to make it work better for everyone.
So we have a question.
Yep.
So you said that parents can elect to get wraparound. Does that mean anyone can get it, or do you have to qualify?
So wraparound is for those who have the most complex cases. If you're familiar with the CANS, it's a 0 to 3 type of rating for needs and strengths. And I'm not sure of the exact number that you have to have, but it is intensive care coordination is generally for people who score 3s in the needs, and have a qualifying number of needs and lack of strengths in areas.
So, and also it was one of the models, but I think the question also gets to the point of, can you just say, I want this? And so I don't think that is the case. There does need to be a score.
Your child would have to qualify for intensive care coordination. If they qualify for intensive care coordination, you can request wraparound as the type of intensive care coordination you want.
Yeah.
But if your child does not have a level of need that would require intensive care coordination.
Because again, care coordination is there.
Right, you will still have care coordination. It just wouldn't be the intensive care coordination with
the assigned roles. Exactly.
With it. Okay, so moving on from the centralized complaint line here, we're going to transition a little bit over to Angela here to help us understand how can we work with professionals, what can professionals do, and what can we do as parents to facilitate, because we all will have child and family teams. We all will be working together. It may be a small one, maybe a large one. But
So these are, the next few slides are going to go through what professionals can do, and also then what parents can do. And when I said in the beginning that this can be applicable to many audiences, not just those in the YES program, but we'll maybe provide some examples of this as well. We talk to, in our office, we interact with parents and professionals, professionals being a lot of the folks that Janet mentioned earlier, but a lot of times we're talking about teachers, but we're talking about counselors, we're talking about doctors, we're talking about a lot of different folks that are in the system. So the first thing that we hope that professionals can do or will do is to be both hopeful and honest about the child's abilities and potential. That gets back to that hope and high expectations. I think that I have some examples, but I had a physician for my daughter with a developmental disability who was just fantastic. She said to me one time, "What is it called? How do you pronounce it?" We were looking at a potential diagnosis, and she says, "How is it pronounced? And why haven't we tested for this already?" And so when the pediatrician asked me this, as a parent, I know I'm respected, first of all, as the parent and as knowledgeable. And I appreciated her honesty in that she didn't know. She didn't know, but she wanted to know and she wanted to work together. So that's a great example of how professionals can be honest. And then also about the child's abilities. It's, we're going to get some parameters around that. What are their abilities? And not just their strengths, but their abilities. So,
and I think that's, there's so many things as you're talking that pop into my mind about my own personal experiences with this. But I think one of the things that we really hope professionals will do is help us understand what part of our child's experience and their behaviors in particular, when we're talking about serious emotional disturbance, what part of their behaviors are normal for the age that they are, because that gets really hard as your kids get into those teenage years. Like what part of it is just normal teenage behavior and what part of it is really extreme. We see this a lot where people try and normalize things,
Yeah.
My child melted down in the grocery store. Oh yeah, my child's done that before. Well, there's a difference between melting down in the grocery store and your child screaming for 2 minutes and your child picking up every can on the conveyor belt and chucking it at the person behind them in line, right? So help us to understand.
Well, and I think that just goes right to the on the screen where it says don't withhold information that may be painful. So trying to normalize things to soften something for a family doesn't get to the need for what could be done. Right. So that's important.
Okay.
We've already talked about accepting parents as equal partners, obviously, but that is sometimes a shift in how professionals interact with families. It's no longer, especially in the YES program, you're no longer talking about just going in and having some sort of maybe a 15-minute appointment. You are really discussing the larger dynamics of a family, and parents are not often, they don't realize that they're equal partners, and they don't realize that they even, again, when we talked about you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know that you can be an equal partner. So I think parents, if professionals tell parents, if they actually verbalize that and say, you're the expert in your child, let's work on this together. And it doesn't matter who the professional is, but that can be really, really helpful in changing how the team works together.
Well, I think it's very difficult for parents. A lot of times we don't have that broad experience, particularly when you have a child with a mental health issue. We tend to withdraw, right? So we don't necessarily know. I mean, my version of normal was really not everybody else's version of normal. Let's be realistic about this, right? But when I went and talked to the professionals, that was what I knew, right? So a professional being able to tell me, you're the expert on your child's behaviors, the impact on your family, the things that are going on in your family, and I'm going to help you figure out where that fits in the bell curve of what's normal. And I'll do that by helping you understand what behaviors are normal for your child and what maybe we, indicate a more serious issue that we need to address. So.
Yeah, I also want to point out that there are, a lot of us are dealing with kids who have diagnoses that are not well understood by a lot of the professionals that we're in contact with. And as parents, frequently we're gonna Dr. Google that to death to find out what that diagnosis is and what it means and how it's manifesting in our kids. So when professionals accept us as equal partners, then they may also be willing to learn about a diagnosis or behaviors that maybe they didn't know about. And so there is the on the slide, it says we ask professionals to be flexible and considerate of our points of view. I know I've had situations with my youngest daughter where I've had professionals come into contact us that didn't believe her diagnosis was a real thing, despite the fact that it is in the DSM-5. So that it makes it hard for parents to be equal partners if the professionals don't even believe in the diagnosis, right? So be open and flexible, please. Moving on. And then I guess this sort of goes into just sort of the next step in that is that by considering parents as equal partners, it really can help with the planning process and the appropriate treatments. I did an awful lot on my own of trying to piece together treatment back in the day because this didn't exist. And so, but parents can be excellent partners in the planning process, and they need to be partners in the planning process for the things that work for their kids.
And telling parents, being upfront with parents and telling them when they're doing a good job. You know, if a parent comes in and they are loaded with information, it's because it matters to them deeply, right? This is the most important thing in their life, is being able to successfully launch their child to adulthood. And it's what we spend every waking minute of every day trying to achieve. So having a professional, I'll never forget the first professional that told me I was doing a good job with my kids. Mm-hmm. It was my daughter's dentist.
Wow.
It was her dentist. And she was probably 16 years old. And that was the first time a professional told me, you're doing a really good job. And, you know, it's been years and it means something. And it also will open parents up. When that's recognized, it will open them up to sharing the difficult things that we're asked to share about our families.
Even the smallest gesture of empathy can just make all the difference in the world. And no matter where it's coming from, I sing her praises frequently. I had a school counselor who she was a support. And when we talk about supporting families in their decision-making, she didn't fully understand our situation, but she was empathetic, and she made me feel valued and supported. I remember she said at one point, Angela, I know you didn't sign on for all of this, you know, because she knew that, you know, but I have really complex kids. And rather than judging me or, you know, the flame shooting off the top of my head when I come in the door, I would say, it's not you, it's not this, I'm frustrated with the system. I might even be very frustrated with my own child. That happens on occasion. But I had an ally. I had a professional who just provided that little bit of empathy. And that was enough to keep me going.
Well, and I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that, it's an immediate acknowledgement. You didn't cause this problem.
Absolutely.
You weren't the cause.
I'm over it.
Yeah. So you didn't sign up for it.
So when that family comes in armed with knowledge, you know, just the same thing. It's like we might look like difficult. We might appear to be difficult or angry parents, but we care desperately. We care desperately for our kids' futures. And so,
and we didn't cause it.
Right.
We're just dealing with it.
Right.
Right. And an acknowledgement of that on any level, anytime, I think it just makes an extraordinary difference.
Yes. Okay. And so this part is on encouraging parent participation. I will say, just from a school perspective, I know that a lot of times parents of kids who have mental health diagnoses, any disability, to be quite honest, frequently do not participate as regularly as parents who do not have kids with these diagnoses in things like PTA or committees or those types of things. Frequently, parents will feel, this is just in the school situation, right? But I think that parents frequently feel sort of like an outsider, and or their lives are so complex that they're just, again, trying to get through the day, and who has time to go at a committee. But when professionals do personally invite that individual invite to the parent of the child who has these complex needs and issues to participate, that is another way that parents can feel very valued in their schools and in their community. And just with the parent network, the Idaho Parent Network, this large group of parents that have come together and have been asked to help develop this system of care. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, I mean, there's always an opportunity, right? If you are a parent of a child with a serious emotional disturbance and you want to participate on any level, we so want you. We want your story, we want your voice, we want whatever information and time you have. And I will tell you from just my own personal experience, when I got started in this, if you've listened to webinars, you've probably heard me say this before, I didn't think I had anything to contribute. I didn't feel like my story mattered. I didn't think it was a story that was like everyone else's stories or representative of other people's stories. And being a part of the Parent Network and talking with other parents who have experiences that are way similar to mine. How many times, Angela, have we had when did you become a fly on the wall in my house?
Right, exactly.
Right? Like, how did you know this is what I experienced? There has been nothing in my life that has been more rewarding and more full of grace and more life-changing for me than understanding that my story is so similar to so many other people's stories. And
then when we are invited to participate on these committees, whether they're small or big or statewide, I mean, ultimately it does create that partnership and systems change. Then it is no longer just about our individual child or our family. It becomes much bigger than that. And you end up with the system of care that includes the parent voice. Right. And so now, a lot of what we just said, what professionals can do, we'll say that parents can do the same thing. And we'll go through and we'll talk about what some of the things that parents can do. I think in this slide, the most important one to me is the thanking professionals when they've been helpful. We are again, we may have an awful lot of needs and struggles happening in our families. We may have systems that aren't working. We may have no answers. We might have really, really, really challenging behaviors happening in our homes and in the community. But there is always an opportunity to say thank you to somebody. And again, I mentioned the school counselor. She really was somebody that I meet, and the school principal at one point, I was able to say thank you. I realized she had 25 years in working with kids with these diagnoses, mental health diagnoses. And when I learned that, and she started to share some of that with me, I was able to see, again, I've got more people here that are going to be supportive of my family and my reactions to and interactions. And so, but I firmly believe that there's always somebody that we can say thank you to for helping us through this process.
And I think one thing, Angela, I want to add to that is in this YES system of care, it was not easy for agencies like the Department of Behavioral Health and Medicaid and Juvenile Justice and State Department of Education to ask parents to come in and give their opinions. Frequently and even early on for us, we have a lot of anger and resentment towards these different groups because we feel like they're the ones that are blocking access to the services and supports that our children need. And we desperately saw the need for that. It was not easy for them to ask us to come in and listen to our voice. And
sometimes our voices are still angry.
Sometimes they are.
And so
that's the reality of it. We're fighting for our kids every day. But I want you as parents to know, and any professionals that are out there, I've worked now for 3 years with Department of Behavioral Health, with Medicaid, some with Juvenile Justice and some with State Department of Ed. There's some other parents on the Parent Network who have done more work with them. I can tell you unequivocally, I have not met an individual in any one of those agencies who isn't as desperate to have this work as we are. They are devoting, and imagine devoting your time, your energy, your efforts on this super fast track, lawsuit driven work that you're still doing within the confines of what your agency is capable of doing and trying to interact with all the others. They all really want this to work, and they have worked so hard and so many overtime hours that just personally from me and from the Parent Network, I want them to know how much we appreciate them because burnout's high.
Absolutely.
And they've done, without them, we would not be where we are. Yep. So know that when you're going into this and when you run across bumps in the system, and I'm going to flat out tell you, it's not going to work perfectly.
Well, it's a period of time for full implementation, and not everything not everything is in place at this point.
And everything that we want in our minds that we sat down and we all want to have work, it's just not all going to happen up front initially the way we all want it to. If you design any system this big, it never is going to come out the way
overnight.
Perfect overnight, right? It's going to take time. And that's why, again, referring you back to the complaint and concern line to say, hey, I have a concern about this. Yeah. It's not working the way we want it to. But these people work so hard every day to make sure that they've got a system of care that's set up that's going to be able to actually show improvements for our families. Yeah. And we appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, we can move forward. This one is really reinforcing learning strategies at home, and I also included in the community because we're talking frequently about not just learning strategies, but maybe behavior strategies as well. So I know that whether it's in school or with community providers, I've heard from professionals, educators over the years, especially where they think parents don't do anything. We do it all here, and then parents don't follow through. And in some cases that may be very true. And again, why aren't they following through? Maybe we need to explore that a little bit, right? There's the whole family dynamic there. If I've got more than one kid with a lot of needs, then there might be a reason why I'm not following through. Or I work 2 jobs and my husband works, or I'm a single mom. There's so many reasons, right? But we do tell parents that you can really look for ways to reinforce strategies. One way you can do that is by actually asking what strategies are being used. Now, with the child and family team, you should have that, right? However, in some settings, you won't have that. And I know that we've been told by educators, well, families don't want to know those direct instructional strategies. And I have found that families really do want to know that, because it makes, if I don't know what strategies are being used, say in the classroom, or what interventions are being used for behavior in the school setting, how do I carry through and follow that at home and reinforce that? That is why I think we see so frequently, well, the school says my kid does this, but we see this at home, right? And it might be complete opposite. So my kid's fine at school all day. At least they say my kid was fine all day at school, flying under the radar. But by the time she gets home, it's full on, here comes the battle.
She's maxed out for the day.
Yep, absolutely. And on the other hand, I hear from parents who are saying the school is just, my kid's in behavior rooms all day, and I'm being called to pick them up, and they're, and all of these things, but they're fine at home. So we don't have these problems. So anyway, I think that when we are talking about reinforcing those whatever those strategies are, you have to know what they are in order to be able to do that with each other.
And the reality is, if you're not employing similar strategies across every aspect of your child's life, you are going to see a wide dichotomy of where, school, my child's crazy, and home they're fine, or vice versa, so it is important to come together on those things and come to what can we do that is effective, that will work across all the systems that my child's involved in.
Right.
Because there are sometimes things that you can do in a more structured environment of school that you can't do at home.
Exactly.
Or vice versa. But
or in a counselor's office,
right.
Or those types of things where things are in very structured, and then all of a sudden you've got at home it looks very different. And
so we all need to be, that's where the expertise comes in from everyone. We need to be able to discuss, and have a strategy that covers all the different aspects.
And it's really important to make progress.
Right.
To make progress. I know that it was very, very difficult for me to help my daughter make progress at home when I knew that it wasn't being followed through in the school setting. So there's the opposite, right?
And there's frustration and resentment that comes from that too.
Exactly. And so sometimes this kind of can go back even to what parents can do, what professionals can do. Parents can help the professionals know these are the strategies we're using at home. How can you integrate this or implement this in the school setting as well? So that can go both ways.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. Next slide.
This is the same thing. So we said we want professionals to be honest. Parents need to be honest. Parents need to be honest about what's happening with their children in those child family team settings, without fear of judgment.
Right.
I think that's probably one of the things that we struggle with the most as parents with a lot of these mental health diagnoses, is that we're so afraid of being judged. And it's not just judgment, it's also fear of having child protective services called, and or having our children. So it needs to be a safe place in order for parents to be honest. So one way a parent can be honest is by saying, I'm going to be honest. One thing that I did with my daughter is I included her no matter what in every meeting. Now that worked for me. That's not for everybody. I know that for a lot of folks, how the child is included in meetings and planning and those kinds of things it
varies depending on what your child can tolerate.
In our house, though, it was the philosophy of nothing about her without her, for a couple of reasons. Partially, I wanted her fully knowing what everybody was discussing and how the planning, because ultimately it's about her becoming an independent, productive, healthy, happy adult, right? But I also included her because we have in her diagnoses, there are frequently misunderstandings, perhaps lies, those kinds of things. And so I needed her to be there so that she knew we were all speaking the same honest. We were being honest about everything. And I gave her the opportunity to correct me if I ever said anything that she didn't feel was on target. Do you agree with this? Is this what's happening? And she would get her 2 cents in as well. So parents, go ahead.
I think it's important too, like you said, by prefacing it, I'm going to be honest, preface it when you're afraid, right? I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you afraid of? I'm afraid that I don't know where the defects line is. I don't know where what happens in my house crosses a line into something that someone's going to call, or I'm afraid someone's going to see something and misinterpret it and call Child and Family Services on me when, because these people that you're dealing with your child and family team, they are there to support you and help you. And one of the greatest things I was always afraid of was the unknown. I don't know where that line is where, when does someone call Child and Family Services? Or I don't know what's going to happen if my child has a complete meltdown in public, so I'm totally afraid to go in public. Well, let those professionals know, because they can help you, they can educate you, and they can also help set up a plan so that you don't have to be afraid. Because if you're knowledgeable, then the fear goes away. And so I think that's got to be that safe place where you can acknowledge, I'm terrified my son's going to, stab me in my sleep, or my son's going to, run away, or he's going to, whatever it is, right? I think that's the child and family team. That's the place for that, right? That's that safe zone. And parents and professionals, you have to build that trust within that child and family team. Yeah. And it's incumbent upon everybody in there to do that.
Absolutely. Moving forward. Solutions for disagreements. I think you mentioned it in the very beginning. We're not all going to agree. The team. We're not all going to agree on all things at all times. So we again in our office, we do a lot of work around helping parents understand skills for effective advocacy, and that doesn't mean that we all even do that well. Sometimes I mean, these are our kids, and that comes with an awful lot of emotion at times. And so, but it is important for parents, as anybody who's watching this, to know that there are ways to disagree without being disagreeable. Right. I think a lot of times, if they're offering solutions, can be the very best way to have disagreements without being disagreeable. So if all we're doing is complaining, or if anybody in the team has a naysayer or complaints without solutions, it makes it very, very difficult to find an agreement.
Yes, or to say, I'm very, very frustrated about this behavior in my child, or this reaction. I don't have the solutions. What do you all think? Do you have suggestions for me? And we can, I've tried this and this and this and this and this, and I'm not where I need to be. I think that's really, really important to understand that you can disagree with professionals, but be courteous and considerate about how you do it, and they can with you as well.
And the another part on this, and it comes up, I think, in another slide as well, but it talks about keeping children out of disagreements. So as I just stated that I kept my daughter in all the meetings, when you are disagreeing, then, and you're doing it effectively, and your child happens to be there, they at least hopefully can see that model of a respectful disagreement and seeking solutions. But children should not be brought into anything that's adversarial to the point that because our kids are they're gonna pick up on all sorts of nonverbal cues never mind the verbal stuff that might be happening. So we definitely want to keep our kids out of those things, because they'll form their own opinions and they'll repeat as well.
And like the slide says there, it's not personal attacks, right? Keep it so that it's professional, but focus on the issue and not on the person that you feel like the issue may be.
Exactly. Right? Good way to put it. Yeah, it's the issue. So this is just a whole bunch of information on communication. And this is included primarily because most of the time, problems exist due to communication. The calls we get in our office, probably 99% of issues boil down to people not understanding each other. Communication breaks down, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. The ability to talk about the issue and not the person, is really where that lies. So these are just some tips on how to have productive communication.
And know too that within your child and family team, as you should have a care coordinator. There is a person who is there that should have training on on dispute resolution and how to resolve these types of things. So they are there to help you, not only to help you coordinate and make sure that you have the services and supports that your child needs and your family needs, but that it's done in a way that is consistent with what the family needs, for your family, but can also help you resolve those disputes with providers or with anyone else that's on your team. So.
And it's not even just for disputes. We also recommend that families and professionals, in no matter what setting they're in, are communicating with things backed up in writing. Right. Written communication is really important. Not because there's a problem, but just to have the documentation of what's happened and what's occurred. That is actually really helpful for planning, obviously.
It is, yeah. As we go through raising children, the further along you get in this process, the more you realize that somehow your brain cells end up more on the floor in puddles than they do actually in your head. So having something that's written down that helps you say, well, have we tried this before?
Exactly.
Have we looked at this before? What happened the last time we did X, Y, or Z?
Well, and that's important too, because your team members are going to change inevitably as your kids get older. So what did we do in the past? What worked? What didn't? How did we do that before?
And why didn't it work? Did we try something at age 5 that totally fell apart that maybe at age 10 or 15
would be a better fit?
Just the right fit for our child, and knowing that. And I think it's super important. For me, I know when I had, sorry, just reading a little note here. I think it's really important to understand the value of having care coordinators. This is something that we used to have in the developmental world.
Yes.
And it went away. And my experience when I had a service coordinator for my daughter with severe developmental disabilities was really phenomenal, because she knew everything that was going on within the system of care. She knew things my child wasn't accessing because they weren't appropriate for my child, or she didn't need them yet. And then when the crisis hit in our family and I needed something yesterday, I didn't know it existed. But my daughter's care coordinator did. Right. And I was able to go to her and say, this is where we are. And she's like, okay, this is what exists. Let's see how to, and she
care coordination it is critical in this process for our kids with mental health diagnoses. It just is, again, you're juggling, families are juggling an awful lot, and having that person, that stable person with the knowledge base that can kind of put things together, put the little puzzle together for us at times, is just going to be really important.
And there's just acknowledging, there's no way as a parent you can do it all. Because when you're a parent of a child with severe emotional disturbance, it's not just the parent role. Right. You are the caregiver role. Yes. You are the nursemaid role. You are the, the representative of every possible scenario that you don't ever want to see happen role. Yeah. Your taxi driver, your, complaint resolution negotiator, your therapist,
police officer,
right? You're pretty much just about everything.
You're everybody.
So having an effective care coordinator, I think, is going to be a huge, huge boon for families.
Yeah. So this last little bit here is on, so the YES program is really based in family-centered, child, youth-focused care. And these are just 3 things that we can talk about real quick. You can talk about the person-centered service planning process in there. I just wanted to add 2 other things. Making action plans, maps, and a child youth profile. Those are just templates. Maps are templates used in person-centered planning. And so I just wanted to include those for folks if you wanted to just go and if you want to Google the maps and how that template can be used in the person-centered planning process.
And the person-centered planning process is simply it's a process. So there are 2 different scenarios here, right? If you go through Liberty to have an assessment for your child, one of the requirements of access to the YES services, the YES system of care through Liberty, right? So if you have Medicaid and you didn't go through Liberty for your assessment, your child just has Medicaid, you do not have to go through this part of it. But it is available. So if you needed you have Medicaid and you needed respite, or you chose to go through Liberty Healthcare for access to, up to 300% of the federal poverty level, to have access to Medicaid for your child, one of the requirements is a person-centered planning process. That is somewhat different from a person-centered service plan. But regardless, what it is it's sitting down with your professionals, and all of your plans are in writing across the different systems. So if you have any place that your child is touching the medical system of care, they have one plan that goes into effect, so that you're not trying to coordinate, well, my therapist does this, and my school teacher does this, and my this does that, and my this does that. It really does. And within YES, as a total, within your child and family team, this also is the philosophy of it, right? Is that we're no longer having a therapist that has goals here for your mental health and a therapist for speech over here that has these, and the contrary, right? We're now, it's all on the table, so we've laid everything out, so you don't have plans that are working against each other.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. And that's all I really wanted to say on that. The child youth profile, I believe on the Idaho Parents Unlimited website, I believe we have a form, just a basic template of a profile that can be helpful to have for the child, especially in, what are their likes, what are their it's just a small form that can be used. It's really great for teachers, for schools to see more about a child snapshot about them. So, okay.
So that really is the end of our presentation. We do have some polling that is going on right now. So if you do see those polls pop up, please go ahead and respond to those. Again, if you're on YouTube, respond on the chat section. And then this part we have just for parents only. So we know there are some professionals out there that are watching our webinar this morning, and we're super glad you're here. But for parents only, there are 2 questions where we would like some response from you to help us do a better job of doing our webinars. First of all, we'd love to know what topics you're interested in for future webinars. What would really help you understand the system better, participate better, whatever it is that you feel would be important to you. And then also, do you have suggestions for us to improve our trainings for you all? So if you wouldn't mind, if you're on YouTube, pop those answers in the chat section. If you're on Zoom, go ahead. It's on the right-hand side of the chat section. So please go ahead and pop in answers to that. So I'm not sure, we're all good. So Angela, one of the things that you said right there at the very end, talking about having the youth profile, one of the things that someone brought up to me, and I think it was someone from the Angelman Syndrome Foundation ages ago, but it's something that I thought would be really, really important for families, is that we had someone tell us, if you're ever, like, we drive our children everywhere, right? Well, what happens if you're in an accident and you're incapacitated? So they had us write out and put in our glove box with our child's name on it and everything, the critical information for someone to know immediately if you're in an accident with your child in the car. It also is super helpful if you end up going to the emergency room. You can bring that in and just hand that to the ER nurse, right? So these are ways that this is what my child will interact well. This is how my child, for me, my daughter's nonverbal. She has a seizure disorder. Loud noises may cause her to react negatively, these types of things.
I think too, just completely separate from that, but in our kids with SED, having a child's snapshot, just that little snapshot of your child. And when you see the template, you'll see it lends to the child's strengths, which is a good thing, because it's hard sometimes for us to find strengths.
Yes,
it is. I mean, when you're dealing with challenging behaviors and these types of things, it's hard. And so when you fill that out, when you create that little snapshot, you are sort of helping yourself in that strength-based process, in knowing you're helping people see your child from their strengths and their likes and their interests and those things. Even as a parent, it can help draw some of that out. So it just, it gives the picture of the whole child to people who maybe only see one piece of them.
And
Yeah.
helps us change our focus so that we're
Yeah.
not quite so always focused on what's not.
So we do have a question about where is that form you just mentioned, snapshot of the child?
I believe, and I might be making things up, but I believe I believe it's on the Idaho Parents Unlimited website. So IPUL Idaho, IPUL, Idaho.org.
Which is on your screen with the,
And I think if you, shoot, I'm trying to think, our website is big and you could get lost in there. I think Amy in our office called it a playground. So I believe that it's probably under the education tab, and I'm going to guess that it might be on the right-hand side of the page where we have a bunch of forms in our education section. If you don't see it there, again, Google and you just put in Idaho Parents Unlimited student snapshot and hopefully it'll come up.
And if they don't find it, can they call you?
Sure.
They can call me.
Or they can email us. They can email us. They have that information. They can certainly email us as well, and I can get it.
Ways to grab
Yes.
So to let folks know real quick. So there are a couple of people that didn't get on early, kind of only got part of the presentation or not the full presentation. If you go to the YouTube site for Idaho Federation of Families, you will find an archive of all of the webinars, and you will find today's webinar there. It will also be archived on that Idaho Federation of Families website page, but that takes a couple more days to get it downloaded and for it to show up there for our resources. So it is now currently on the YouTube site for the Idaho Federation of Families, and you can jump onto it and see the entire presentation.
Great.
So great information. I think you guys could just like keep on rolling.
Probably could.
Luncheon. So let's like save some of it for another day.
Thank you.
The power of your stories, because you all have been there, had struggles, really found the benefit of working collaboratively with a lot of the professionals. I think done at a time where it wasn't necessarily always easily accepted. Now that it's becoming kind of recognized as best practice, this is the way to really have the best outcomes for families and for children. But it's a shift, a huge shift, and it's not just for the professionals; it's also a huge shift for parents.
Absolutely.
And it's going to take time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's going to take time, and some people doing it well, for other people to learn how to do it better.
Right.
And that's all important in the system, and just to recognize that, you know, it's not a panacea. It's going to happen, but it's going to happen by people putting forth their best foot and trying to make a difference day by day.
Yeah.
And for parents to be confident. And I think part of that confidence is coming in knowledgeable about like the type of meeting you're coming into, and also, you know, being able to step a toe in there if it's not happening the way it's supposed to, and letting, you know, the group that you're working with a little more information about what the principles of care are and how it's supposed to happen. So it's not across the state, it's not going to be blanketed and stepped out of the exact same way.
Well, yeah, it will look different in all parts of the state.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
So I think we're running out of time because Susie is giving us the signal that says we're done.
Stop talking.
Thank you all next time. Thank you very much.